Welcome to another geocaching podcast profile, this time featuring Podcacher. Welcome, Sunny and Sandy.
Hey there, Dale. Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Well, I'm glad to finally get you guys on to talk about what is the longest running of the geocaching podcast. So in a few words, can you tell us what is Podcacher now?
What is Podcacher now? Well, Podcacher, I would say, is a family-friendly variety show all about geocaching. So, we bring in news, tips and tricks. We talk about tools of the trade. We do interviews. We talk about gadgets. We talk about caching events. We have videos that are supplemental as well. So it's just a variety show, and we keep it family-friendly. Yep. So would you add anything to that?
I think you covered it well.
There you go.
And a little bit more than just the podcast, I guess.
Yeah, well, we try to mix it up. So we've of course, we mix in the audio visual of videos as well as images and blog posts and things like that. So, yeah.
Well, and it started off very differently, not like totally differently, but, not quite what it's become. Mm-hmm. And I was listening, I think, since episode 5, went back and all the way to episode 1. And that was like when I was first getting into geocaching. But what was it, for those who might not know, that got you guys started in podcasting?
Well, so we have
him.
It was me on the podcasting part, because what happened was I'm just very curious geek, and I like to find out about new technologies, especially about the potential implementation and use of them. So when I found out that something that I created with our voice out here in San Diego could be, well, not broadcast, but it could be distributed throughout the entire world, I said, this is cool. And I really didn't even have an idea of what topic. I just thought it was really cool to be able to do it. And podcasts were really, this is back in 2004, 2005. 2005. Yeah, so I was listening to podcasts and a variety of things. A lot of these podcasts are no longer existing, about a variety of subjects. Some of them just simple talk shows. And so I said, oh, we ought to do this. And then Sandy was the one who came up and said, hey, we ought to do it about something we enjoy and know a little bit about, and that's geocaching. So
we needed a topic. We didn't want to just sit there, and we needed something to talk about. Yeah. And so it seemed natural to talk about geocaching. Yeah. And I think, did you have some gear, or did you go out then and buy the little recorder?
Yeah, the iRiver.
Yeah.
The very look
and
it up.
One
microphone, a simple iRiver. It's like the lowest level iRiver thing. And I'd actually heard it online, another podcaster saying, hey, this is a great way to go mobile. And so I bought one and thought, wow, I can do this. And you got to figure out all the little pieces, where to host the audio and how to figure out RSS feeds and all that. But slowly, piece by piece, we figured it out, and we actually got out. And now we listen to our first shows, because we were sitting on our living room couch with just a microphone and
just sharing
talking back
to
it. And man, they sound bad. They sound really bad. We're embarrassed about them, but it's part of our history. So, that's what it is.
And I thought, honestly, this was just another geeky phase. This is something he wanted to try. Mm-hmm. And okay, we'll talk about geocaching, and we'll do it for a couple of months. Yep. Until he kind of gets tired of it.
Yeah. But there was enough interest out there. We just kept going and going and changing the format a little bit here and there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and if I recall, it actually kind of got started with something that you guys were calling a podcache.
Oh, the name.
Right.
Yeah, right. So and again, from another podcast, that person had heard about geocaching and said, ooh, I wonder if people can make a geocache that uses a podcast and maybe call it a podcache. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty cool. And we were trying to think early on, we didn't have the name for the show, what it was going to be. I think we were either going to call us a geocasters, geocasting. And then so we just finally settled on Podcacher, because we said, hey, that sounds like cool. So we actually did. We hit a few of these geocaches that a portion of it at least was based on an audio file. And so we thought we would hide more and more of these things. And that's why we named it Podcacher at first. And so, so it's stuck now.
Yeah, now you can't get rid of it.
No.
Yeah.
They reminded me kind of like an audio letterbox.
That's a good way to explain
it. Because the clues are audio, and our idea on the ones that we did is that the person would wear headphones and take their MP3 player and follow the same path that we followed, and be listening to us as they see the things that we saw, and as we describe them. And we, the first ones that we did here in San Diego are still there.
I think there's like 3 of them.
People still go out, and we still get feedback that they think it's unusual. They enjoy it. It's it's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, if you come out to San Diego, so there's one out here.
There's 2.
Escondido and then Balboa Park. So the one in Balboa Park is a good one because having lived here in San Diego all my life, Balboa Park is this really large public park out here with buildings and old style Spanish architecture. Anyway, so I knew quite a bit about the park, and I thought, okay, let me just kind of brush up on all the historical information about it. And then what we'll do is we'll decide a final location for the geocache, and then basically do a multi-cache where you, and sort of a mix of a multi and a puzzle cache, where you had to walk around the park, learn certain things, and then get certain clues that would give you coordinates to the final. And so that's really what it was. And it was sort of letterboxing in a way, but it was just a combination. But you couldn't find the final, the multi-cache, unless you actually walked the walk. And the whole purpose was, the whole idea anyway, was to walk with your headphones on and listen. Like, if you turn to the left, you're going to see this fountain over here. Well, go ahead and take a look at it and count the amount of shells on that thing. And then you see that thing over to the right? Well, that's an organ pavilion. That was built in the, and so I just gave a little information. I think that's why people enjoy it. So it's almost like they can walk through the park with us, with them. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's sounds like it's kind of like the tour guide concept that I wanted to do when I found out about geocaching.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and lead people places, and this makes it a little more personal. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I was looking at it for the, stuff that's gone. How do we give them a particular spot to play this audio? So I was looking at geocaching for maybe some ideas about how to get me, some kind of trigger that I could use. And of course, that never panned out.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. We just did something here locally in San Diego, and this can be done anywhere. What we did was we chose some iconic locations out in San Diego, and this was for a recent hike that we did. And we said, okay, what's neat about this location? So if you come to San Diego, there's certain places like Coronado Island, Mission Bay, Balboa Park, right? And so we went to some of these places and we said, okay, what can we tell people who might be visiting or didn't know about this particular spot they're standing in? So what we did, and this is just a bonus, this has nothing to do about finding the geocache. What we did was we hit a cache, and you can just play it normally. You can find the cache, sign the log, and be done with it. But if you want to, on the logbook itself is printed a QR code. So if you want to, just for fun, you could scan that QR code with your iPhone or your smartphone, and then you can listen to an audio file that's attached to that QR code and get a little bit more behind the scenes. So it's like, those museums where you like, tell me a little bit more about this painting. And so we did that. And so it's kind of incorporating, again, our audio bent to geocaches where we've hidden.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Now, getting back to the actual podcast, to Podcacher, how has that developed over these years?
Well, it's certainly over time become more of a variety show. We used to just have like one main topic, but then we started bringing in a lot more types of things, different news items or gadget reviews or stories or contests. And so it kind of developed more as a variety show. And we got, as our audience grew larger, we'd get more input from people, people writing emails or wanting to call in a milestone. And so it kind of also grew kind of the way the audience kind of led us as well, with the input that they gave, as well as just the technical aspects. We learned more and more as we went along. We got better equipment, and so that improved it as well.
Yeah. And echoing what Sandy's saying too, we got feedback from our audience that they enjoyed certain segments, certain things. One of them, for instance, is when we go out on the road. A while back, we just tried this thing and just wanted to find out how difficult it was to produce it and if it would be interesting. And those were travel caching episodes where we would go somewhere and we would do caching, but then we would bring the audience along. And it's a little more difficult than a studio created where you control all the elements of it, because sometimes, you go travel caching and you don't know what's going to happen. So it's like going out and we plan our destination, but we don't know what's going to happen in between. So these travel caching episodes where we go out with the microphones, and now video, we're doing more video now, where we'll go out, have an adventure, and then try to make it palatable so that it's interesting to a viewer or a listener. And they come along with us, and those are something that we got a lot of feedback that people like those. So we started doing those as well. Any opportunity we get.
Well, and most of the podcasts you hear now are recorded in a studio.
Yeah. Well, and that's partially, I think, out of necessity. It's especially if you have a panel and ours oftentimes is recorded in the studio. But we like to get out there and mix it up. And again, it's a variety show. So we try to do different things. And again, just listen to what they're interested in so that we can provide more of that.
Well, and you mentioned that the gear has changed over time. And of course, a lot of that gear is going to break down anyway and has to be replaced.
Oh, yeah.
So what is it that you're using to record the shows now, and how does that whole production work?
Oh, gosh. Well, yeah, we have gone through several iterations of and I was really persnickety about my sound. I mean, I was really like, oh, that doesn't sound right. And especially earlier on, if you could see behind the scenes of our old gear, it's embarrassing, but it worked. Like, okay, let me give you a perfect example. When we used to do interviews, it's going to sound so ghetto. When we used to do interviews, I couldn't, they didn't have the tools that we have today. Like even just using Skype with call recorder, we didn't have the tools we had today. So here's how it was done. I used to sit with and get an interview with somebody, and they would be on a phone on their end. On mine, I would have a landline speakerphone. All right. So it was a landline speakerphone, and it was on the ground. And then I would have the recorder mic right here. So that way, the recorder was recording my voice, and then anytime the person I was interviewing was talking, it would record their voice through the speakerphone. And that was it. And I couldn't control the levels, if his voice was too loud or whatever. The only way I could control it was how close I was to it. And I couldn't even monitor with that original iRiver. So I couldn't even hear what it was sounding like. And it was just like it was almost like, shooting film photography, where I'm like, oh, did we get it right? Over time, though, we started using more digital recorders, but I think the one that we're using right now is the 4th or 5th iteration of a digital recorder. Right behind us, actually behind this gray curtain over there, is a studio, a very small studio that I built, just enough space for Sandy and I, but inside it, for sound baffling purposes, I've got blankets hung up in there so that we don't get any of the reflective echo, and it works, and so we've been using it all the time. I've got some egg crate stuff on the top. I have electricity in there for lighting, and there's an on-air sign that you sent us many years ago that we still use, and every time we power up the whole studio, the on-air sign comes on. So just so you know,
nobody can see it but us, but it's
right
there
over there.
Studio.
And so anytime we hit the power, because this all is under one circuit, so once I hit power on the whole thing, the soundboard lights up, the recorder lights up, the mics are hot, the electricity's in there, and then that on-air sign that you gave us long ago is in production still. So just so you know. But
the recorder, which is what?
Oh, it's right now the recorder that records everything is a little, and you can find, I think they might be, you may not be able to get them anymore from Amazon, an Olympus LS10. And
so it's the same one that we take out traveling. It's our portable one.
Right.
And then we just take it in the studio and plug it into what board do we have in there?
Yeah, it's a little very inexpensive soundboard. And then I used to have a compressor on there, but it fried on me, and so I'm going directly into this little LS10. But I found the LS10 had some ability for me to modulate enough where it's good enough. Yeah,
we have two mics.
Yeah, and well, here's one thing that's changed. Here, where technology has played its part, is where we're killing less trees now. because early on for our show notes, so that and we don't have the script all written out. When
the bullets, the ideas, the main things that are going to lead us through.
Unless it's a news article where it's something that we're reading, or maybe something that one of our listeners wrote to us, then we're reading straight from it. But most of the time it's just bullet points. Well, we used to, put it together, put it together on the computer, and then print paper, and then go in there. Two copies
of all of them.
So
now we use our iPads.
Now it's iPads. We're using Google Docs, PowerPoint, and some different online resource tools to sort of organize it. So ahead of time, we have topics that we can say, okay, we'll put this on next week's show, or, oh, this one goes on this show coming up because, but this one's timely. We got to use this one this week. It's hot right now. For instance, challenge caches. So it's got to go on this week's thing. And then we kind of mix it around until we say, all right, that's about 45 minutes worth of show time. She estimates, but often doesn't estimate how long I can talk. So she has to underestimate, and then I'll take care of the rest of the time. No problem.
Oh boy. So along the way, obviously there's been a bunch of hit and misses. What would you say were some of the things that went really well and some that might not have gone so well?
Let's see. Good question. We always seem to have, and when we started, we didn't feel like we'd have enough content, to go more than a couple of months. But it was amazing how once you start looking for content within, the geocaching world and community, it wasn't as hard to find as you would think. And then starting to, bring people into interview, and then getting that input from listeners around the world, was really important. And I think we figured out how to do that pretty well to make it really interesting. From the very beginning, we wanted to be an international show and appeal to an international audience, and really try to keep from being US centric and US focused. And, we've had a lot of feedback that we've, for the most part, been able to do that pretty well, and appeal to a lot of international listeners.
I think one thing that's helped is the relationships we've developed with our community. I mean, and again, an international community. So what's happened is, I think a lot of the listeners that are out there feel this connection with us and with geocaching, rightfully so, right? So, because we have this thing in common, geocaching, and they also can pick up nuances of our personalities from the show, whether it's music or food or exercise or education or photography. And so we'll get a lot of those kind of personal insights from our listeners. And because of that, we have a lot of content. People say, hey, did you see this article? Or, hey, Sonny, did you see this thing? Or, hey, Sandy, did you see this? Or you talked about this on your show. So it gives us quite a variety, because it's a rich audience out there that feeds us a lot of things that they're interested in and maybe want to hear more about. So that's helped. One of the challenges that we've ran into, especially earlier on, were, again, on the technical side. I mean, there are times, especially early on, it hasn't happened in a really long time because we have safeguards, but there were times, and I don't know if this happened to you, Darryl, but there were times earlier on when we lost, after working all night. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. We just worked for an hour and a half. We recorded everything, and then something went horribly wrong. And out of 555 shows, I think it's maybe happened 2 or 3 times. But when that happens, honestly, at 2 in the morning, and you go, the show needs to come out, take a deep breath, get a drink of water, and let's do it all again. It's got to come out. So we've done it, and it hasn't happened often. Yeah, but now we've got a couple safeguards and backups and things like that to make sure that it doesn't. And again, on the technical side, something that we haven't been able to control, especially early on, was again an interview over Skype. Sometimes the glitchiness of it just makes it almost unbearable to listen to. So I don't know. And then there's been scary points too when we've changed our website over. And Sandy is the webmaster for the website. I mean, she knows all the ins and outs. So changing it over entirely can be a real scary, daunting thing where we think, oh my gosh, the entire site is down. So I think most of the challenges that we've run into have been technical in nature. But because of the audience that we have, it's easier to get the content that we need to make it an interesting show.
Yeah, I don't think I've had too many of those occurrences with the total failures. It's always when it happens, like in the field during the recording, that something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it's stuff that you can't control, like, I lost power for 5 days or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. And what are you going to do with that except be adaptable, flexible, and move on and figure out what's really important. So,
right. Yeah. Which, as we had talked about on our profile, is one of the nice things about having the hosts on opposite sides of the country.
What's that?
Well, the show can always go on. If I can't do it, the bad cop can do it, because if I get hit by a tornado, it's not going to hit him out there.
Well, that's true. Yeah. There have been very few times that we have not put out a show. Been very few times where for whatever reason we intentionally didn't. A lot of times, if we know we're not going to be around, we will either pre-create a show, or many times when we're out at one of these mega events, Geo Woodstock, traveling, or even on vacation, we'll make the time to put together a show in the hotel room. Everything from the editing, remixing, and then publishing right from our laptop. Sometimes sitting on a hotel bed, and like, okay, hit publish, get it out there. So,
or we'll record ahead of time.
Yeah.
We'll plan ahead and record a whole show and just have it ready to go. I think once or twice. I've never done the show alone, but I think one time I was so sick I couldn't do it, and you just did a short show by yourself.
That's true. Yeah.
But that hasn't happened too often.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the advantages of not doing a live production is that you can record whenever you need to.
Yes.
Right.
Very true.
Yeah. No, I have a tremendous amount of respect for any podcaster who does a live show and is basically working without a net, and just that impresses me, because for me, and it's not so much, I think one of the things that Sandy and I have gotten more comfortable with, I used to be really persnickety about my audio quality, but also I used to be persnickety about how we sounded. Mm-hmm. So I used to be a lot more picky about our ums and our or let's say that again, or that didn't come out right.
Mistakes, yeah.
Now, if you listen to our shows, we'll flub and just kind of go keep going, whatever. So I think that part of it is just, you just get comfortable with how you sound and continually work at it. We strive to produce something that's easy to listen to. Well, we try anyway.
Well, what would you suggest to someone who wants to get started in podcasting?
Think long and hard about it. No, that doesn't sound very encouraging.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Save yourself.
No, wait a minute. I mean, there's, it's fun. There's a lot of positives about it, but it's certainly more work than you would think, just starting. So you've been a podcaster for as long as we have as well, Darryl, and you've seen how often people start with great excitement and then fizzle out, after a few months or years.
Was the term, right?
Pod fade is the term, yeah. But on the other hand, it's really cool. I mean, more and more of these podcasts related to geocaching are popping up, and everyone has a different perspective, a different voice, different ways of doing it. So many are doing it live now, and different takes on it. It's, I think it adds to the whole geocaching community, and it's not that difficult, any more than it was when we started. You just need a little bit of equipment to get started. If you want to do it live like you do, you kind of go into that side. So yeah, just going in with your eyes open with kind of a good idea of what it is that you kind of want to be known for, or what it is you want to bring to the conversation, and contribute.
Yeah, those are all good points. I would say do enough research on your own to find out, are you of the personality and whatever you're doing a podcast about, is it sustainable? Okay, so is it something that because if you're going to do a podcast on, banana bread, you might have a limited run, because once you've talked about all the variations of banana bread, and you're on episode 10, what are you going to do for episode 11? So think about your content, and is there enough content and quality out there, or to be able to put out something. The other thing I would say is, if it is sustainable, is it scalable? Are you going to be able to continue to put it out there? And consistency is hugely, hugely, hugely important. And that's why we kill ourselves to make sure that our podcast comes out, because we want to give our audience that secure sense of continuity, of making sure that you're putting something out there all the time, once a week, twice a week, whatever it is.
Whatever you choose,
be consistent.
You can be consistent with that.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say is, if you have kind of analyzed that, both your personality, your time, are you going to be able to be consistent? Is your content scalable? Is it sustainable? The last thing I would say is, if you've got the basic premise for it and you think you can do it, then do it. Just get out there and do it. Get some okay gear. You don't have to have perfect sound. Just get something out there, because you'll learn a lot. Just like photography, this is my analogy. You'll learn a lot from just doing it, and you'll find out what works and what doesn't. So don't suffer from paralysis by overanalysis. And sit there and go, oh, no, I better wait. And, I don't have the right equipment. I don't have the right sound, stuff like that. Just do it. Put out something. And you know what? If you're not sure about it, then reduce the time. Don't go for a 45-minute show. Put out something that's 20 minutes long and see how that feels, and see if you're comfortable with it. But do it. Just get out there and start putting out shows. And they don't have to be perfect, because our first 10, 20, 100 shows were far from perfect. And again, they're part of our history. We're embarrassed to listen to them ourselves. We try not to, but it's part of it's part of our history, and we just got out there and did it. And then start to get feedback, because that'll either sustain you, or maybe tell you that that for whatever reason, it may not be your fault, whatever reason is not working out. But so those would be, I think, my suggestions.
Well, and I would also add, don't be afraid of a podcast that does have an obvious end. Just make sure that that's something that you manage, because some of the most popular podcasts in the last few years have been shows that ran for only a few months, or sometimes even a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's true.
So maybe you can do a podcast
Doesn't
about
have
banana
to go
bread
forever.
Yeah, you do. This is my 18-part series on banana bread.
There you go. There you go. that now somebody's going to do it. Watch.
They probably already have.
They're a banana bread podcast.
I don't know. Right now, that might end up being something that's done on like Snapchat or on Facebook Live.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. The technology out there, the resources are far different from when we first started, right? I mean, from when we first started, what was out there wasn't any Periscope, there wasn't any Facebook video live, and there's SoundCloud now, and the platform you choose can be very simple. If you were going to do an 18-part series on banana bread, maybe you don't put it out on an RSS feed through iTunes. Maybe you just put it out on your own channel in SoundCloud, and just kind of test the waters to see how many banana bread fans are out there. How do we get on banana bread?
You brought it up. I was talking about geocaching podcast, and you just went out and left.
Well, okay. I'm just saying. So look at that. Look at some of the tools out there that allow you to maybe record, publish, and do all that stuff. With not all the complexity of a full-blown podcast, maybe.
Well, you talked about the way technology has changed, and I think it might be good for some of our listeners to recognize that when we got into podcasting in the first place was in the early days of podcasting.
Yes.
And the reason that podcasting was built to work the way it was is even that like 40 megabyte show couldn't be played back in real time. So your 40 megabyte 1 hour show would say like 3-4 hours to download. Yeah. So they were setting up the RSS feed to go and download that file, drop it into iTunes, because there was no iTunes podcasting yet.
Yeah.
This was all external scripts that would go and do this, and then load it onto your iPod. So when you left for work the next day, you had all of these new shows.
Right. Yeah. Things indeed have changed now, where streaming, Stitcher and other things allow you to,
Or we have an app now that people can just get our get our shows through the app.
We've got apps on the phone. It's all live. Now we're talking about things like Periscope and Facebook Live, where you're actually streaming video up from your phone. So
Right.
this little handheld device.
Yeah.
Smaller than that original iRiver recorder that you had.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now does video.
Right.
And sends it up to the cloud real time in better than VHS quality.
Real time, and where we can get feedback right then and there from the participants listening, in China or whatever, right? It's impressive.
They're watching right then.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not China.
That was only 11 years ago.
Yeah. Darryl, because we've been doing this since the beginning, because you were doing a bike, right?
Mm-hmm.
A Michigan.
Right. Yeah. I started the bike show, I think, I'd have to go back and check, but I think about 2 weeks before you guys started Podcacher.
Okay.
Ours was early July 2005.
Yeah.
Oh, so maybe it was 2 months, because mine was March, I want to say.
Okay.
But we're all sounding like, old crotchety.
Yes.
Back when we first started, everything was steam powered. Get off my lawn, kid.
Well, we could do exactly the same thing too for geocaching.
Right.
I was having this conversation not too long ago, where when I got started, I was punching in the coordinates manually, because even doing it via the serial cable took too long.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm on this little black and white screen, no maps, because the maps were useless anyway on this black and white screen.
Sure.
And took days to load. So I'm running around with that and printed pieces of paper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually we got to the spot where we were using PDAs with various apps, and at that point the Pocket Queries would include the Mobi Reader format. So you had this little Mobi book, the select ebook, that you could load onto your device, and that got purchased by Amazon, which became the Kindle format. So they couldn't use it anymore because it became Amazon's format, and they lost the rights to it. So it just disappeared, and we had to go do other things like Cachemate.
Right. One of our really early shows was about paperless caching.
Yeah.
And it was about using Cachemate on what you just said. The PDA. Yeah.
Darryl, you probably lost like half of the younger audience who doesn't even know about printing out a cache. You might as well be talking about, styli and cuneiform and tablets and things like that.
Well, what the interesting thing is, I've talked with a number of the younger cachers who, when they go for either a letterbox or a Earth cache, still tend to print it out because they want to be able to have that physically there. They don't like reading it in the field. They just like making the notes. Yet here I am using Evernote, which I'm getting sick of because it's gotten too heavy and takes me too long to do things now.
Oh, okay.
But I'll do Evernote to do all of my Earth caches, and they're just scratching it down on a piece of paper. It's like, now I feel
paper sometimes.
Yeah,
I have to say I do.
Occasionally.
There's sometimes I've gone to the notebooks more often than I'd like to admit the last couple of months, just because it's gotten so much harder to use some of those tools that were simple, and I haven't had the time to go out and research what is a good replacement for Evernote.
No, it really depends on what kind of cache we're going for out there. We'll use it, but I have to say the spontaneity of being able to now just bring your smartphone and say, oh, I wonder what's around us, and get all that detail on there is just, I think it's changed the profile of caching. When you said you used to punch in numbers, I remember, and because we were using a Garmin, I think it was a Legend, it was the blue one. So it's very similar as far as interface to the Garmin Yellow, right? And so this is getting pretty close to actually being steam powered. Because in order to put in your coordinates, you had a toggle switch. It would go up, down, left, right, and click to enter. Yes. And then you had this little gray keyboard on your screen, and you had to, oh my gosh, like how did I ever do that? But it's sort of like
exactly what most of the units are still doing if they don't have the touchscreen.
If they don't have a touchscreen.
Right.
But it's sort of like how texting has evolved. I mean, now people are expecting, the evolution of how texting, because right now a lot of people have the touch screen. You go back, it was maybe a BlackBerry where you had a physical keyboard. You go back farther and it was just a 9 or 10, right? And it was, you had to text that way. Like, wow, how did we ever do that?
Such. Yeah.
But we lived, we're still around.
Yeah.
Yep. And now we're confused by all the newfangled gadgets that, make our lives easier and more complex and always connected. But yeah, like FTFs were a totally different game, even like 6 years ago. Because even 6 years ago, it was, people were just starting to get the iPhones or, what was it called? Pocket PC, but they had a different name for Windows Phone.
Right.
Okay, you mean for notification speed like that, you mean?
No, well, so that you'd have the app on the phone with everything, but you'd get the push notification through like the Yahoo or BlackBerry Messenger. And that was the other one. Remember, I can't remember Trimble's version.
Oh, yeah.
I think we both had done testing on that when they came out with the new version of it, and they sent us the Blackberries to test on. And that's when I decided I need to get a smartphone for caching.
Yeah, I remember that they sent us one for testing. I did a little video on it, and it was like, it was okay.
It was okay, but it showed me where it could go, and I knew that BlackBerry unfortunately wasn't going to be the answer. And then the iPhone came out. It's like, this is definitely where it's going to go.
Yeah, but even the first iPhones, if you remember, the
GPS.
Yes, and then even when the GPS was incorporated, it was awful.
Not
I mean, It's taken a while to where you get to the point now that it's reliable and you've got all the data, and of course the apps that support it too.
I was just going to say it was largely the apps, because remember the 3G, which was the first one that had the GPS built in. You had a choice of Geos. Maybe it was like Gopher Light or something like that.
Yeah.
And there was another one, but they were all doing web scraping. So they weren't very fast, and they had all kinds of problems in just acquiring.
Yeah.
You didn't have the control of the GPS in iOS 2 that you had even in like iOS 3 and 4. So these apps were so terrible.
Yeah.
Locating the cache and pointing you in the right direction even. But the phone was pretty capable. Of course, if you had the CDMA versions, which was later on, you still had problems with accuracy in certain conditions. But the GSM ones, by the time the iPhone 4 came out, those things were good enough that you could definitely leave your GPS at home finally.
Yeah, that's where it really started to change. I was going to say, it's the infrastructure. It's it's obviously a coming together of multiple things. It's the external infrastructure, it's the internal apps that are there, and then the development of geocaching or ground speaks capabilities, APIs, and things like that were allowing things. And also, I mean, even just battery life. I remember, oh my gosh, it was like, I can't go caching for very long,
Well, and at that point, most of us were just looking for a replacement for the PDA.
Yeah, right.
We weren't even looking to replace the GPS. We just wanted something where we could go up, we could get current information. Because I can't tell you how many times I would go load the GPS the night before, get out, start looking for a cache, and we can't find it anywhere. And someone happened to have a phone with an internet connection at the time. They'd go up, it was archived last night.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, well, I mean,
that always seemed to happen on those big caching trips, and you're slowing yourself down. We're going to get 50 today. We're going to go and do 50 caches. Well, we just spent 20 minutes looking for this cache that's been archived.
But what I find interesting is, like, we just went caching earlier, and we still carry around our dedicated GPS, of course. I mean, there's certain things that having one of those is still so. It hasn't completely gone away, so part of the old school technology is still going to be reliable and out there. But it's interesting to see where things are going, including the ability to listen and create shows like this.
Sure.
So it's all connected together, I think.
Yeah, well, and one of the problems that we're running into now is, since we're doing so much of our caching from the smartphones, when we do stuff like Periscope, we don't get to see where we're caching anymore. So it kind of adds a new twist to what you're doing, unless you have that second unit like the smartphone or the GPSR with a smartphone.
Yeah, you're right.
You can find the cache and not have to switch out of Periscope and lose your connection.
Yeah, our solution typically is because we have more than one, and so we can use one for the Periscope. And part of it, to be honest with you, is we just need to remember to do it. Because we're out there, we're geocaching, having a great time, and we go, oh, we should do this. And we just did one recently for a Facebook Live, which worked pretty well. I would have never thought that certain social communication tools like Periscope, because of its transient nature, because of it goes away, or Snapchat, but it's become such a viable way to connect with your audience. And we really enjoy that. I think one of the coolest things is we will do a Periscope and start seeing the numbers roll up, and those, everybody wants the little hearts, but it's the coolest thing to see somebody who just happens to be on right now, and you take them along on a little quick caching trip and you get to show them San Diego, and they might want to visit out here sometime. But it's interesting how much it has taken hold because of that, unanticipated the part where it just goes away. You would think, you
remember that as of 2 weeks ago, Periscope now by default saves them forever.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. There's little toggles that sets it to save for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Or its default now is save forever. But they did a big thing shortly after Catch folded, because Catch was the tool of choice to keep those forever.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, we are going to do it. You can use it now. All you have to do is put the hashtag save in there.
Oh.
And that would keep it for 24 hours. But
okay.
now they switched it. So by default, it saves it forever. And you have to turn that to the other mode for just 24 hours. And that actually scares me a bit now.
Yeah.
Because I'll go out, do these caches, and, they're like, if I know it's going to be a really excellent cache, I start right from the beginning, let people come along for the hunt. But now I'm giving out all these spoilers.
Yeah.
I find so much when it's like after 24 hours, it goes away. But when it's staying forever, that worries me a bit.
That they switched that, because that was kind of one of the quirky things about Periscope, to kind of make.
What was that other one? What was that other one? Is Meerkat still doing anything?
Meerkat is still out there. They've kind of changed their focus a bit.
Okay.
But I don't know of anyone using Meerkat.
Yeah, me too. So
it's really, I think it's a tool that's used by some of like the bands, but I can't remember for sure that that's what they were saying. But it has a much more limited, narrow audience than does Periscope. And Facebook Live, that was one of their big things, is that it never goes away.
Yeah.
So I think Periscope felt the pressure that they had to do something.
Right. Yeah.
And they didn't want to feed it to like YouTube.
Well, I got to tell you, Darryl, all these tools, because it goes both ways, all these tools make us feel much more connected to our audience, because I'm seeing pictures that are posted on Flickr or Instagram or whatnot, from Facebook, obviously, that really brings us a sense of where our audience is coming from, what their interests are, and things like that. So it's really neat, where that level of communication certainly wasn't around at the early days of our podcasting. It felt like it was more one way, and it wasn't quite the kind of community and feel that we have today.
It was really just email,
Yeah, email.
As far as this direction from the audience to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say that Instagram is one of my favorite spots for getting great cache ideas these days.
Oh, yeah.
Posting such amazing photos of great caches that it's just like, I got to go and do this cache.
Yeah. Well, another place too, and I think somebody might have, is in Pinterest. Maybe surprisingly, there's some really great cache things. You just go and searching Pinterest for it. But see, that's what I'm talking about. Everybody is an author. Everybody can publish things right now and connect with other people out there. So it's really cool to be part of this, and have our voice still out there after over 10 years of podcasting.
Going on 11.
Yeah.
It's 11 and not too many more weeks.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about where it was and where it is now. Where do you think podcasting in general, and more specifically the geocaching podcasts, are going to be going?
Podcasting in general. You can take that part.
You know, I think it's been an evolution that's obviously grown more and more in the connection, again, with the community. I think podcasting was one way to really personalize whatever your passions were, your brand, if you were, because blogs, blogs took off because of that personal connection to whatever your passion was. But it was consumed by reading, and then video is consumed in a very different way. I mean, you can't consume video when you're driving, or shouldn't, right? Or riding a bike. Where podcasts, I think they have the mobility of having the dense content that is available in a blog and writing, and yet you can consume them in a way where you can listen to them while you're driving in a car, or riding a bike, or going geocaching. And so I think it's going to be around just because it's a different medium. I certainly like what you can get from video and video podcasts and things like that. But I think podcasts are just going to continue to connect you with your community. I think these ancillary resources that we've been talking about, like Periscope and Snapchat, and as Facebook continues to grow, and Instagram, I think that podcasters and media creators of any kind just need to be savvy and understand that that's part of it now. That's part of how you connect with your audience and have them be interactive with you, as opposed to just consumers. And that's what we really enjoy. There's nothing, well, there are a few things, but one of the things we love is getting audio and sometimes video from our listeners out there who either call in questions or maybe a first to find, because then they get to be part of the creation of our show, and other people get to hear their voice, and we get to hear their voice, and it really makes it much more personal. Darryl, you probably had this experience as well when you go to a large event and people have been listening to your podcast or watching any of your videos, that they connect with you and they feel like they've known you. And in the cases where we have gotten pictures from them, videos from them, and had heard their voice, we too say, hey, wow, it's good to finally meet you face to face and shake your hand. And we really enjoy that aspect of it. I think that's one of the things that keeps us driving. But as far as what I see into the future, I think the audio medium still has great, huge potential to connect people because of the delivery and the method of consumption.
But I think you make a good point about all the tools, that more and more it's becoming multifaceted. People don't just do the audio, they also do the video, and they do some of these other, they use some of these other tools for connecting. And I think with geocaching podcasts, I would expect there to be more. I think people are starting to see, that there are all these tools and it's not that hard to do. And like I said earlier, they want to kind of get their voice or their perspective out there. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see more people joining and saying, oh, I want to do that too, whether it's audio like we do or the live video that seems to be real popular. Yeah.
Well, and as you were talking about the different ways that you can consume the audio where video doesn't make sense, hiking down the trail is a perfect example of that.
Yes.
I have to think with the popularity of the fitness devices, we're going to see more interest again in the shorter podcasts, because it's all been going to the longer podcasts for years now.
Yeah.
It started out with, drive time podcasts, and then it got into the long form podcasts. And I think with the jogging and running and, people wanting to listen to it on the bike, it's going to get back down into that, 20 to 30 minutes. So there's definitely room in the podcast space, geocaching in particular, for some of that shorter content again.
That's a really good point, Darryl. And as we alluded to earlier, sometimes we struggle with shorter podcasts because of me, and it's my fault because he
likes to talk.
See, and it is. But here's something on the practical side of that is we've gotten feedback, and maybe that's changed, and so maybe we need to take a new temperature on this. But we've gotten feedback that they want longer shows from Podcacher because we've gotten email and letters and stuff saying, I usually listen to you on my commute to work. And then if I don't finish it, I'll listen to the other half on the way back. And so if the show's too short, then they kind of, oh, I have nothing to listen to. Like, oh, all right, well, we'll try to make it. So we've hit what we think is our sweet spot, but you might be right. I mean, maybe a shorter consumption, and we'll have to take a poll and find out, would people want a 20-minute podcaster? I mean, because everything scales, and you guys probably know this as well. Everything scales. When we make a longer show, it takes more editing time for me to put out that longer show. And of course, the file size is bigger and all that. But if people were actually happy with a 20-minute show, I just don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I could talk that little.
Well, there's always so much to cover. There's kind of like the main topic, and then there's all the other things. I don't know. There just always seems to be a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I would be, and since it's not video, you wouldn't see me, but I'd have to be sitting there just most of the time to get it to 20 minutes. Just.
Well, when we did the geocaching podcast all those years ago, we would get emails if we ever went over 30 minutes.
Really?
Guys, I love the show, but my commute's only 20, 25 minutes. I just can't listen to this anymore.
Well, okay.
Please keep it down. And by the time I started Geo Gearheads, people would demand more than half an hour. They wanted that. If 42 minutes was the average of what people were telling us they wanted.
Interesting.
So we were targeting that 45-minute mark, and of course, most of the shows are closer to an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're doing the live shows, you can't edit anything. So when you start talking, it all goes in there.
Yeah.
You can't easily keep it down to that 42-minute mark.
Yeah.
Right.
So no, Sandy produces the show in the sense that she'll take the content that she thinks is relevant, pertinent, timely, and the right amount, right? And then she'll hand it over to me to familiarize me with what we're going to be talking about and things like that. And then that's where I start coming up with the ideas of tangent things, whether it's music or stories or my take on it, and sometimes I'll think of the
jokes,
the side humor. Yeah. No, honestly, that's how it works. I'm like, I'm going to say this.
Oh, there's a good pun I could say here.
Yeah. And a lot of times she doesn't know it's coming.
Yeah.
Most of the time she has no idea that I'm about to pull the humor or whatever. So it's authentic. It's what you hear on there's real. But then that makes the show what it is. So she produces it and tries to get it right. And then sometimes she'll say, you know what? I feel like it's a long show. Let's take this out. We don't need to talk about it and move it to the next show after that, and then try to hit it. And then sometimes we're successful and sometimes we aren't. Sometimes it's either surprisingly, most of the time it's longer than we think.
Yeah.
Very rarely is it shorter than we thought it was going to be. Like very, very rarely. So I don't know. It's just how it goes.
Well, and that kind of production should go into a live show as well, where you're planning out what's going to be in there. Okay, it's going to take some time to figure out how much is what as a producer. But make sure to sit down and do that if you're going to be doing a live show even. Okay, here's what we have. And what we try to do with Geo Gearheads is put in a couple of extra points on some of the more flexible shows. And sometimes we hit them, but most of the time, like you were saying, it's you just go long because you get into all these little tangent conversations. And it's like, okay, now we're going to go to an hour and 10 minutes because we really want to hit on this last topic.
Yeah. Or, I would assume, and I don't have that much experience with this, but I would assume if you knew who was going to be on the show and how many of you there's going to be on the show, and how many guests and things or who the guests are, then you might say, oh, we got to cut this down short because this guy can talk. So, and then what do? How do you gracefully, okay, good enough. Let's move on to the next thing. And you don't. You either go long, go long, or you just drop off. All right, well, we covered one topic today. And it looked like our time's up.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that if anyone's starting off with it, you just have to get the experience and learn how this stuff works in real life, because you can read up on some of the techniques, and it really, until you get in there and actually practice it, it doesn't do you much good.
Well, you know what, really, if you think about it, but for broadcast, any of the major networks and things where they are tight. They have to go to commercial at these times, and the total amount cannot exceed 23 minutes for a 30-minute show because of the commercial time. I mean, they're tight, and that brings a lot of respect to realize that whoever the host is, right, the live talk show host, has to be able to somehow, and there's cues, I'm sure, that we don't see off stage, but there's cues that say, okay, time to wrap it up. And yeah.
Well, and a lot of that goes back to a good producer who's already, you'll many times have a AP, an assistant producer who does it, but they will take care of, working with the guests ahead of time. Here's what you're going to have to expect. Here's this, let the guests know what to do. That, this is what we have. So when, David Letterman says, okay, we have to take a break, you're taking a break. There's no two ways about it. But even Letterman had a number of guests that kind of took over the show, and he had to bump guests because, like Madonna, wouldn't leave the stage.
Well, I would rather have good, entertaining, inspiring content that goes a little long, as opposed to, sometimes I've been on Skype recordings with people who we're recording, right? And they may have great content, but when I ask them a question, I'm hoping for more than just yes,
Right.
So it's like, can you give me a little more? and so having it go short is also like, and so it's a balance on our side too, to be able to draw out, the conversation and really make it a real conversation. Yeah.
All right. So the last question is going to be, if you had this do all over again, would you still have done it?
Oh, I would say yeah. Yeah, I'd say yes. If I had to do it all over again, I'd be, and having the knowledge that I do right now, there are certain things, especially with sound and content early on, that I would do differently. But unquestionably, the benefit and blessings that we have gotten from doing Podcacher, again, is really the contact with all these really cool people around the world. These people who happen to love geocaching is sort of the core foundation of our interests, but also the other stuff that there's parents and grandparents who love the fact that we share about Sean and his growth over the years. And so, stuff about whether, again, with photography or scrapbooking or any of the interests that we share, musical stuff, any of the interests that we share, the connection is just amazing. And I don't know how that would have happened if it wasn't for the podcast. We've had some amazing adventures because of the connections we've had all around the world. We've taken journeys and brought people along with us on trips to, oh my gosh, where have we been to? Spain, France, Kazakhstan, Norway, all around the United States. And we've taken people along with us and connected with all those people around the world because of this. So absolutely. It's a lot of hard work and dedication. And so if there's any part of discomfort or pain, it's from realizing how much work it really takes to do it well. But we've learned a lot over the time, and the connections that we've made are absolutely precious. Yeah.
I would agree with Sonny's answer, but I would also say that when we first started, like within the first few months, in the place that we were at that point in time, if someone said to me, "You're going to be doing this for 11 years," I would have said, "No way."
So you wouldn't
I don't want to do that.
You wouldn't have.
I wouldn't have believed it, and I wouldn't have wanted to.
Oh, okay.
But I think looking at it from if somehow, through a magic ball or whatever, crystal ball, whatever, somebody would say, "You're going to be doing this for 11 years, but this is what it's going to look like after 11 years, and this is the kind of experiences that you're going to have, and this, this is what it will feel like," then I would agree with you. I would say, yep, sign me up.
Yep.
All right. And then before we take off, tell everyone where they can find you guys.
Okay, so pretty easy. It's at Podcacher, Podcacher, podcacher.com. Everything is there. So just go check out the site. You can explore around. One of my recommendations would be, we put an intro video there, didn't we?
A little intro video, yeah.
Yeah, so if you've never been there, I would suggest to find that intro video, because then it kind of gives you an overview of the site, because there's a lot there. I mean, if you've never been there before, again, there's blog posts, there's videos, there's resources and stuff like that. There's an email list that you can sign up for, so you get that. So there's a lot. It may be a little overwhelming. So I would suggest look up that intro video, find out about that. But you can find everything that you want down there. You got stuff to download, resources and things over at podcacher.com.
And some of the podcasts you can like look up ones that are interviews. You can look up ones that are travel caching by category, ones related to geocaching HQ, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys are on Facebook, Twitter,
Twitter,
Plus, Instagram.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, and Sandy alluded to it earlier, but one of the easiest ways to listen is we have free, and we did that on purpose with the help of the support of many of our listeners who agreed and wanted to make it free, so it doesn't even cost you 99 cents. But for iOS, Android, and I think Windows.
Yes.
Yeah.
Three.
Yeah. Surprisingly, so on your mobile device.
Maybe not Windows.
Maybe not Windows.
I was going to say I think the Windows phone app has been taken out now.
So don't try to get that one.
You can get it through Amazon or through Google Play.
Right.
Or iTunes, but it's just iOS or Android.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a free version of the app, which is specifically designed to download or stream the newest podcast. So that's the easiest way to listen. Honestly, if you don't want to mess around with anything, download the free app, find it for Podcacher, and then you can just listen to all the stuff. And you can go into
go back to all the ones,
and listen to some of the old ones if you really want to listen to. Listen to those horrible first shows if you really want to, but that's the easiest way to listen to the show if you want to. Makes it easy. Yeah.
And it's so incredible what content is still out there from all of these podcasts, and I really don't think people have the chance to go back and check them out, especially because iTunes will only keep a maximum of 300 shows. And how many shows have you guys done now?
555, 56.
Well, we're on number 556, but if you count all the midweek micros and everything, it's over 700. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're right, over 700. But if you go to the website, podcacher.com, you can manually go over there and go to show number 1.
Right.
If you want to.
Or through the app. You can get
or through the app.
Yeah.
In fact, and we'll share on our upcoming show that one of our listeners has been listening to older shows, and that they've been a supporter of ours, which is great. One of the reasons we keep going, but they've been listening to older shows, but because there's so many, they were actually able to listen to like maybe 2 or 3 a week. Well, they finally got to the end, and so now they're down to 1 a week, just like all the other people, right? Listening. And he goes, I don't know if I can stand that. I'm going to go back to show 1 and start listening again. It's like, really? Just in case. Yes. Just in case there's anything I missed. And we're like, that's awesome. That's great.
Well, and the refresher never hurts, right?
Right. Except we're going to be talking about stuff like paperless caching and using the Palm Pilot. I mean, if you listen,
there's still other great tips back there.
But you think about it, that's all stuff that educates you about how geocaching is developed and why things are the way they are.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
It's totally different looking at like geocaching versus Munzie versus like Ingress.
Oh, yeah.
All of them were based on the technology available when they started and have developed from there.
Right.
Yeah, very true. So if you want to subject yourself to that, you can do that on the app or find it and just, and you can cherry pick them too, I guess. You can go to the website, look at the topic that is there and say, oh, okay, I'll listen to that one. I'll download that particular one and listen to it. I mean, honestly, if you go to some of our early ones where we went to Spain and France and we did some of our earlier travel caching ones, those are cool. Those are, a lot of them are pretty neat. And, it takes you to a time when we were still learning about things about geocaching. And so you can kind of go along for the ride.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there's so much entertainment value in there, whether the information is antique or not.
Yeah,
that's right. We're always entertaining.
Try to be.
And we mentioned Windows Phone, so maybe we should take a moment of silence because as of Monday, the Windows Phone app from Groundspeak officially dies.
Oh, okay.
And there's a small but very disappointed group of people.
Yeah,
there's 2 cachers I know of.
Both of them are disappointed.
We got emailed from several, so they're disappointed.
Yeah,
might be the same too.
Well, I'm sure some of them are included.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us and giving us a little bit of insight into Podcacher.
Well, thanks for having us, Darryl.
Thanks. Good to be chatting with you again.